Don't keep watching this video if you still want to stay the same person who gets overlooked, ignored, and emotionally manipulated by everyone around them. Because what I'm about to tell you is uncomfortable, but it is also real. And once you truly understand it, you will start seeing people differently for the rest of your life. Most people think they get disrespected because they are too nice. Wrong. Most people get disrespected because they accidentally teach others that there will be no consequences for crossing their boundaries. That is the real problem, not your kindness, not your personality, not your background. The problem is the energy you keep sending without realizing it. And toxic people notice that energy immediately. They notice how quickly you apologize. They notice how uncomfortable you become when someone is upset with you. They notice how often you explain yourself. They notice how badly you want to avoid conflict. And once someone realizes that you are more afraid of making people uncomfortable than you are of betraying yourself, the entire dynamic changes. Because now they know something important about you. They know you will tolerate things you should never tolerate. Have you ever noticed something strange? There are certain people nobody tests. Nobody talks over them constantly. Nobody keeps making disrespectful jokes around them. Nobody repeatedly crosses lines with them. And the interesting part is that these people are usually not the loudest people in the room. They are not aggressive. They are not trying to intimidate anyone. But something about them makes people automatically become more careful. People measure their words around them. People think before they act around them. People naturally respect their space. Why? Most people think it is confidence, or money, or status, or appearance. But it is something much deeper than that. Those people have standards, and more importantly, they truly believe their standards matter. That belief changes the way they move through the world. Now compare that to people who constantly get taken advantage of. They walk into every situation trying to read everyone else emotionally. Who is upset? Who is uncomfortable? Who might reject them? And then they immediately start adjusting themselves to keep the environment comfortable. That is the mistake. Because the world does not respect people who abandon themselves every time tension appears. And modern society creates millions of people exactly like this. People pleasers. People who say yes when they want to say no. People who stay quiet when they feel disrespected. People who over-explain themselves constantly because they are terrified of being misunderstood. These people are not weak. In fact, many of them are extremely caring and emotionally intelligent. But their kindness gets weaponized against them because they never learned how to create limits. And human beings naturally push against spaces that have no boundaries. That is just reality. Every interaction you have with another person teaches them something about you. Every single one. When somebody says something disrespectful and you laugh nervously instead of addressing it, you teach them something. When somebody takes advantage of your time and you continue saying yes, you teach them something. When somebody talks to you in a way that makes you uncomfortable and you pretend it is fine, you teach them something. The lesson is simple. You can do that here. And once people learn that lesson, they repeat the behavior. Not always because they are evil, not always because they consciously plan to manipulate you, but because human beings naturally repeat behaviors that have no resistance attached to them. That is why disrespect usually grows slowly. It starts small. A rude comment, a dismissive tone, a joke that crosses the line, a lack of consideration. And every time you stay silent, the line moves further. Then one day you suddenly realize something painful. You feel invisible. You feel emotionally exhausted. You feel like you are always the one giving more than everyone else. You feel like nobody values you the way you value them. But the truth is, these patterns were being built for years without you noticing, and patterns become automatic once they repeat long enough. There is a concept that changed the way I understood all of this forever. In every house, there are two things connected to temperature, a thermometer and a thermostat. The thermometer only reacts to the environment. If the room is cold, it reads cold. If the room is hot, it reads hot. It has no control at all. It simply absorbs whatever environment it enters. That is how most people live emotionally. Someone becomes cold toward them and they immediately shrink. Someone sounds irritated and they instantly become anxious. Someone changes energy slightly and they start overthinking everything. They spend their entire life emotionally reacting to other people. That is what a thermometer does. But a thermostat works differently. A thermostat sets the temperature. It does not ask the room for permission. It decides the standard first. Then the environment adjusts around it. The people who naturally command respect live like thermostats. They do not absorb every emotional shift around them. They do not constantly change themselves to maintain approval. They stay grounded in their own standards. That is why people feel boundaries around them without those boundaries even being spoken out loud. And this is where most people completely misunderstand confidence. Confidence is not loudness. Confidence is not acting dominant. Confidence is not pretending not to care. Real confidence is emotional stability. It is the ability to remain connected to yourself even when other people become uncomfortable. That is why calm people often feel powerful. Because manipulation usually depends on emotional reactions. The easier you are to emotionally control, the easier you are to influence. And toxic people understand this instinctively. They watch how quickly you react, how quickly you defend yourself, how quickly you try to fix tension. That is why over-explaining is often a hidden sign of weak boundaries. When you constantly feel the need to prove your intentions, justify yourself, and convince people to understand you, you unconsciously place yourself beneath their approval. And manipulative people love that position, because now they control the emotional frame. One of the biggest lies people are taught is this: if you are good enough to people, they will eventually respect you. No, not always. Sometimes the more available you become, the less valuable you appear. Think about water. In the middle of a desert, a bottle of water is priceless. Someone would do almost anything for it. But during a heavy rainstorm, water loses all emotional value. Why? Because there is no limit. Unlimited access destroys appreciation. And many people live their entire lives making themselves emotionally unlimited. Always available, always understanding, always forgiving, always sacrificing themselves to keep everybody comfortable. Then they wonder why nobody seems to value them deeply. The answer is simple. Human beings value what has standards. Limits create value. Boundaries create respect. And this does not mean becoming cold or cruel. It means understanding that your time, energy, attention, and emotional availability are not supposed to be endlessly accessible to everyone. That shift changes everything. Now I want to give you something practical, something simple, something you can start using immediately. It is called the 5-second rule of self-respect, and it works like this. The moment somebody says or does something that crosses a line for you, you have 5 seconds to respond. Not 5 hours later. Not after you replay the moment all night in your head. 5 seconds. Because after those first few seconds, your brain starts negotiating against you. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe it's not worth bringing up. Maybe I'll sound dramatic. And by the time that internal negotiation finishes, the moment is gone, but the emotional damage stays inside you. That is how resentment builds quietly over time. But if you respond immediately, something powerful happens. You do not need a speech. You do not need anger. You simply say something calm and direct. Don't talk to me like that. That didn't sit right with me. What exactly did you mean by that? Short, clear, calm. No emotional performance. That small moment changes the entire dynamic. Because now the other person learns something new about you. They learn there is a line. They learn you notice disrespect. They learn you will respond. And most people stop pushing once they realize boundaries actually exist. That is why the 5-second rule is so powerful. It interrupts the old pattern before it reinforces itself again. Now here is another thing most people misunderstand. Real emotional strength is quiet. It is not aggressive. It is not defensive. It does not constantly try to prove itself. The strongest people are usually the calmest people in the room. Not because nothing affects them, but because they no longer abandon themselves every time discomfort appears. Real unbothered is not pretending not to care. It is genuinely becoming so solid internally that outside noise has nowhere to attach itself. That level of calm cannot be faked, and it does not happen overnight. It comes from consistently honoring your own standards. Every time you speak up when something feels wrong, you become stronger internally. Every time you stop apologizing for things that are not your fault, you become stronger internally. Every time you choose your peace over someone else's comfort, you become stronger internally. And eventually, something shifts. You stop trying to appear confident. You simply become harder to shake. But underneath all of this is the deepest issue of all, a hidden belief. Most people who tolerate bad treatment carry a belief deep inside themselves that sounds something like this. If I push back, people will leave. If I stop tolerating this, I'll end up alone. Maybe this is just what I deserve. That belief controls everything, because no strategy works if your self-worth remains low. You can learn communication skills, you can learn boundaries, you can learn psychology, but if deep down you still believe you are lucky just to receive scraps of respect, you will continue accepting behavior that destroys your peace. That is why the real work starts internally. You have to decide what you actually believe you deserve, not what you say publicly, what you truly believe privately. Because that belief becomes the ceiling for every relationship in your life. If your internal standard is low, people will feel it, and they will unconsciously adjust their behavior downward. But when you genuinely believe you deserve respect, kindness, honesty, and peace, your entire energy changes. You speak differently. You react differently. You walk into rooms differently. And strangely enough, people begin treating you differently almost immediately. Not because you became a different person, but because you stopped allowing the old version of your life to continue repeating itself. That is the shift. That is where your power returns. And once you understand this deeply, you will never look at human behavior the same way again.